The chamber of the Galactic Coalition was built to humble species. Its ceiling vanished into a lattice of light and gravity fields, its walls curved in impossible geometries meant to remind every delegate that the universe was larger than their pride. It failed, Elias Ward thought, watching them argue. They always argued the same way, about ranges, yields, frequencies, and efficiencies, never about consequences. Elias stood at the edge of the amphitheater, hands clasped behind his back, his dark uniform unadorned compared to the glowing sigils and floating regalia worn by the others. He had been placed deliberately out of the center, far enough to observe, close enough to be blamed if needed. Humanity's role in the coalition was still an experiment, and experiments were kept under glass. At the center dais, High Strategist Kethrix of the Aurelian Compact projected a rotating hologram of a warship. It gleamed with translucent shields and radiating beams of simulated light. Energy dominance is no longer theoretical, Kethrix declared, his voice resonating through layered translators. Mass-based weapons are obsolete. Photonic lances strike at light speed. There is no evasion, no armor that matters. The equation is complete. Murmurs of agreement rippled across the chamber, chitin clicking, membranes fluttering, harmonic tones of approval. Elias noted the word Kethrix had used, equation. Aliens loved equations. They trusted them the way humans once trusted gods. A secondary hologram bloomed, this one less elegant, a jagged cluster of rock and metal tumbling through space. The Threxian remnant, Kethrix continued. An asteroid-dwelling insurgent species. Primitive. Kinetic armaments. Crude armor. They infest the Kaldor Belt and disrupt coalition trade. The solution is simple. Simple, Elias repeated internally. It always was until it wasn't. Fleet Marshal Viral, a towering figure encased in adaptive armor, turned one multifaceted eye toward the human delegation. Commander Ward. Your species still maintains projectile weapons, yes. A few delegates emitted sounds that translators softened into polite curiosity. Elias recognized the original tones anyway. Amusement. Doubt. Yes, Elias said evenly. We do. And you consider them effective? Viral asked. Elias met the marshal's gaze. We consider them reliable. That earned a ripple of laughter. Actual laughter this time. Unfiltered. Someone dimmed the human microphone for a moment, assuming the exchange was complete. Elias didn't react. He'd learned early that silence unsettled them more than protest. The projection shifted. Laser fire blossomed across the simulated battlefield, cutting clean lines through vacuum. The Threxian ships dissolved into glowing fragments. It was beautiful in a way that only distance could allow. The exercise will proceed within one standard cycle, Kethrix announced. Coalition energy fleets will neutralize the remnant. Humanity will observe. Observe. Not participate. Not advise. Elias felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Not anger. Not yet, but something colder. Memory. He had seen demonstrations before. He had seen models that assumed enemies behaved like diagrams. Beside him, Lieutenant Marcus Hale leaned in slightly. Younger than Elias by a decade, sharp-eyed, restless. They really think light solves everything, Marcus murmured. They think progress does, Elias replied. Same mistake, new scale. The chamber lights dimmed as the council moved on to logistics. Capacitor cycling times. Thermal dissipation curves. No one mentioned mass. No one mentioned inertia. No one asked what happened when something refused to die on schedule. Elias tuned them out and watched the Threxian hologram instead. The rocks weren't random. They were layered, dense, rotating, ugly in the way that function often was. Armor grown, not designed. Momentum traps disguised as debris. They're not wrong about one thing, Marcus said quietly. Lasers are fast. Yes, Elias agreed. So is arrogance. When the session adjourned, the delegates dispersed in a slow, drifting ballet of anti-grav platforms and living exoskeletons. Elias waited until the chamber thinned before moving. As he turned, He nearly collided with another figure, tall, angular, his surface shimmering with analytical glyphs. Strategist Tovin of the Heliox Union inclined his head. Commander Ward, a curiosity, if I may. Of course, Elias said. Your historical archives, Tovin continued. They contain an unusual emphasis on impact, collisions, penetration. Why did your species not abandon such methods once energy projection became available? Elias considered the question. Around them, the chamber hummed softly, like a held breath. Because, he said at last, energy is something you deliver. Momentum is something you impose. Tovin's glyphs flickered, recalculating. That distinction appears semantic. Elias smiled faintly. It never is. He left the strategist standing there and walked toward the exit, boots echoing softly against the alloy floor. Outside the chamber, the viewports opened onto space, the endless, indifferent dark, broken by the slow drift of stone. Somewhere out there, a battle was about to be fought by beings who believed the universe cared how advanced they felt. Elias paused, watching an asteroid tumble, massive and silent, unconcerned with light or pride. They brought lasers to a rock fight, he said quietly. Marcus looked at him. Sir? Elias didn't answer. He just kept watching, already knowing how this would end, and wondering how many would have to learn the hard way that the universe still remembered wait. The first shots were beautiful. From the observation gallery of the Coalition command ship, Elias watched lances of coherent light tear across the void. They struck with mathematical precision, converging on targets marked by flawless predictive models. Vacuum flared white where lasers intersected hulls, and for a heartbeat the battlefield looked exactly like the simulations. Clean, controlled, obedient. Direct hits confirmed, an alien tactician announced, his voice resonant with satisfaction. Energy transfer within optimal parameters. Marcus stood beside Elias, arms crossed, jaw tight. He said nothing. Neither did Elias. They were watching the same thing, and neither of them were looking at the light. They were looking at what came after. The Threxian vessels did not explode. They did not shatter into glowing debris as the projections had promised. Instead, they kept moving, slowly at first, then with growing certainty, huge, irregular masses rotating through the laser fire as if wading through rain. That's impossible, someone muttered. The lasers carved trenches into exposed surfaces, vaporizing layers of stone and metal. Superheated plasma streamed away in luminous tails. But beneath the scorched exteriors, darker layers emerged, dense, compact, already absorbing the punishment. Ablative armor, Elias said quietly. Crude, but effective. Marcus glanced at him. They're letting the outer layers burn off. Yes, Elias replied. And the energy with them. On the tactical display, warning sigils began to bloom. Capacitor banks dipped as sustained fire demanded more power. Cooling systems strained, bleeding excess heat into space in shimmering halos that betrayed firing positions. The Threxians adjusted. Their formations tightened, ships aligning behind one another, rotating in deliberate patterns. Lasers struck at oblique angles now, scattering, diffusing. Precision became suggestion. Increase output, Fleet Marshal Viral ordered. Overwhelm them. The beams intensified, brighter, hotter. For a moment, it looked like it might work. One Threxian craft split apart, its core exposed long enough to rupture violently. Cheers rippled through the command deck. Then the rocks started moving faster. Asteroids that had seemed inert suddenly burned with controlled thrust. Massive fragments accelerated, flung forward by crude but powerful propulsion. They weren't fired so much as released, momentum doing the rest. Incoming mass, a sensor officer cried. The first impact didn't look dramatic. There was no flash, no bloom of light, just a sudden distortion as a coalition frigate's shields flared and collapsed under a force they had never been designed to stop. The asteroid punched through the hull and kept going, carrying atmosphere, crew, and structure with it in a silent, catastrophic spray. The command deck fell quiet. Shields failed. Viral demanded. Shield integrity compromised by impulse overload, came the reply, voice strained. They're not absorbing energy, they're transferring force. Another impact. Then another. Coalition ships scattered, breaking formation as debris and weaponized stone tore through their lines. Lasers tracked desperately, cutting apart some projectiles, but fragmentation only multiplied the threat. Smaller masses retained lethal velocity, peppering hulls, battering systems. Elias watched the data scroll. He saw thermal curves spike uselessly, saw energy weapons doing exactly what they were designed to do, and nothing more. They optimized for elegance, Marcus said under his breath. Not for this. The Threxians advanced through the chaos, their ships scarred but intact, momentum carrying them forward. They fired no light, no plasma. Just more mass. More inevitability. Why aren't they retreating? An alien strategist asked, disbelief creeping into his tone. Because they don't need to, Elias said. They're winning. The realization spread slowly, like a fracture propagating through crystal. Orders became contradictory. Laser batteries cycled too fast, overheating emitters. Energy reserves dwindled as captains tried to brute force a solution that physics refused to provide. Another coalition cruiser took a direct hit. This time, the impact caved in the forward hull, crumpling reinforced alloys inward. Internal compartments collapsed in sequence, shockwaves traveling faster than any warning. Marcus clenched his fists. They don't care about range, he said. They care about mass and closing speed. Yes, Elias replied. And about what happens when something hits you. A priority signal cut through the noise. Fleet Marshal Viral's image appeared, his armor dulled, one section scorched where debris had grazed him. Commander Ward, Viral said, his voice lower now. Your assessment. Elias met the Marshal's gaze. He chose his words carefully, not for politeness, but for accuracy. You're fighting momentum with light, he said. And light doesn't push back. There was a pause. In that silence, another ship died. What do you recommend? Viral asked. Elias felt the weight of the moment settle onto him, familiar and unwelcome. This was the point where theory met consequence, where pride either broke or killed. Authorize human kinetic assets, he said. Or disengage. The Marshal hesitated. Around him, the Coalition's finest technology bled power and certainty into the void. Authorize, Viral said at last. Limited deployment. You will advise. Advise. Not command. Not yet. The channel closed. Elias exhaled slowly. Marcus looked at him, eyes sharp, waiting. They're still afraid, Marcus said. They should be, Elias replied. But not of us. On the display, the Threxians continued their advance, relentless, patient, carried forward by the simple truth that nothing in the universe ignored mass forever. Elias straightened, already running calculations in his head, already hearing the old equations that had never failed him. Energy dazzled, momentum endured, and the battle, far from over, was finally about to become honest. Authorization came without ceremony. One moment the human ships were spectators on the edge of the battle space, their signatures quiet and unremarkable, and the next their weapon systems came alive with a restraint that felt almost reverent. Elias took the command chair as if he had never left it. The tactical interface shifted, shedding decorative layers until only vectors, masses, and velocities remained. This was a language he trusted. Human detachment, he said calmly. You are cleared for kinetic engagement. Fire discipline applies. We do not waste momentum. A chorus of acknowledgments answered him, steady, unembellished. Marcus moved to his station, hands flying as he synchronized targeting data with coalition sensors that were still struggling to adapt. They're not used to thinking in kilograms, Marcus said. Or seconds. They will be, Elias replied. The first human volley launched without light or warning. Railguns discharged in silence, magnetic fields collapsing as dense tungsten slugs leapt forward at a fraction of relativistic speed. There was no spectacle, no thermal bloom, just a brief distortion on sensors as something very heavy decided to be somewhere else, very quickly. Impact came seconds later. A Threxian lead vessel took the hit amidships. Its layered armor, designed to burn and shed energy, had no time to react. Momentum transferred instantly, brutally. The hull imploded inward, shockwaves rippling through internal structures faster than any system could compensate. The ship folded, then tore itself apart, fragments flung outward by the violence of their own mass. Silence gripped the command deck. "That's not possible," an alien officer whispered. "It is," Elias said. "You're just seeing it without light." The Threxians reacted with startling speed. Their formation scattered, rotational patterns breaking as they attempted evasive maneuvers. But mass resisted change, and the distances were already closing. Human targeting solutions adjusted, predictive not of intention, but of inertia. "Second volley ready," Marcus said. "Fire," Elias ordered. More slugs crossed the void, invisible and unstoppable. One struck an accelerating asteroid mid-spin, shattering it into fragments that retained lethal velocity. Another punched through two ships in sequence, exiting the second in a spray of incandescent debris. Coalition sensors struggled to interpret the results. Energy readings were minimal. Thermal signatures were negligible. And yet the enemy was disintegrating. A Heliox strategist broke the stunned quiet. "Your weapons bypass our shields." "They don't bypass them," Elias corrected. "They overwhelm them. Shields absorb energy. They don't absorb impulse." Another impact rippled across the display. A Threxian ship attempted to interpose a mass of debris as cover. The slug struck the debris, lost none of its authority, and continued on, reduced only slightly, still catastrophic. The enemy began firing again, hurling asteroids and metal slabs with renewed desperation. Human point defense systems responded not with light, but with smaller kinetic interceptors, colliding with incoming mass at calculated angles, breaking vectors, dispersing force. "This is barbaric," someone said, voice tight. Marcus glanced back. "So is dying slowly." Elias ignored the commentary. He was watching the enemy commander now, tracking behavioral shifts, noting hesitation. The Threxians had built their doctrine around inevitability, slow, crushing advance. Now that certainty was being stolen from them. "They're bleeding momentum," Elias said. "Keep pressure. Don't let them settle." Human ships adjusted their positions, not to maintain range, but to shape trajectories. Every shot was an argument made with mass and speed. Every hit rewrote the battlefield. A coalition cruiser, crippled earlier, drifted helplessly in the path of an incoming asteroid. Before anyone could react, a human destroyer fired. The slug intercepted the rock at an oblique angle, redirecting it just enough to miss, fragments tumbling harmlessly past. The cruiser survived. Elias felt the shift then, not just on the sensors, but in the room. Fear was giving way to something else. Understanding, edged with discomfort. Strategist Tovin's glyphs flickered across a private channel. "You spoke of imposing momentum," he said. "This appears less like delivery and more like judgment." Elias allowed himself a thin smile. Momentum doesn't negotiate. The Threxian formation finally broke. Ships attempted retreat, shedding mass to gain acceleration, abandoning debris and damaged vessels. It didn't matter. The equations had turned against them. "Cease fire on fleeing targets," Viral ordered suddenly, his voice cutting in. "Let them go." Elias considered the order, then nodded. "Hold fire," he echoed. The human guns fell silent. In the absence of light and motion, the battlefield looked almost peaceful. Ruined ships drifting, fractured asteroids slowly dispersing. Coalition vessels regrouped, battered but intact. Damage reports streamed in, grim but survivable. Losses that would have been total were merely severe. Marcus leaned back, exhaling. "They'll remember this." "They'll remember wait," Elias said. The command deck remained quiet as the last Threxian ship vanished into the dark. No one celebrated. The victory felt too stark for that. Viral's image appeared again, his posture different now, less towering, more grounded. "Commander Ward," he said, "your doctrine, it contradicts much of what we believed." "It doesn't contradict it," Elias replied. "It completes it." The marshal studied him for a long moment. "The council will demand explanation." Elias looked out at the debris field, at the evidence written in broken stone and torn metal. "Good," he said. "It's time they learned why humanity never stopped believing in bullets." The transmission ended. Around him, alien officers whispered, recalculating their universe. Elias remained still, knowing this was only the first battle, not for territory but for understanding, and that the hardest part was yet to come. The battlefield was quiet in a way Elias had learned to distrust. Wreckage drifted in slow, stately arcs, fragments of ships and stone obeying the same laws that had just decided the fight. There was no glow now, no furious exchange of light, only mass, cooling, moving on borrowed momentum. Coalition recovery craft threaded through the debris, their pilots cautious, reverent. What had happened here would be studied for generations. Elias knew that much. He also knew study did not guarantee understanding. Back aboard the command ship, the council reconvened with unusual speed. The chamber felt smaller than before, its impossible geometry less imposing now that certainty had been stripped from it. Elias stood where he had in the beginning, unadorned, human, suddenly very difficult to ignore. Fleet Marshal Viral addressed the assembly first. His voice lacked its earlier confidence, replaced by something steadier. "The engagement is concluded. Losses were significant. Survival was achieved through the intervention of human kinetic forces." No one laughed this time. Strategist Tovin hovered forward, glyphs dimmed to a subdued glow. "Commander Ward," he said, "your methods contradict our foundational doctrines. We believed energy was the ultimate authority in warfare." Elias met his gaze. "Energy is authority," he said. "Momentum is enforcement." A murmur spread, not of dismissal, but of thought. Equations were being rewritten in real time, and not all of them fit neatly anymore. "You chose restraint," Viral said. "You could have annihilated the retreating Threxians. Why did you not?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He looked around the chamber, at beings who had grown accustomed to war as demonstration rather than cost. "Because momentum doesn't need cruelty to be convincing," he said. "And because today was about correction, not extermination." Marcus stood a step behind him, silent, eyes forward. Elias felt a quiet pride then, not in victory but in discipline. Humanity had not won by being louder or brighter. They had won by being precise. A delegate from the Aurelian Compact spoke at last, voice measured. "Your weapons are inelegant." Elias inclined his head slightly. "So is reality." The council recessed shortly after, not in triumph, but in contemplation. As the chamber emptied, Elias felt the weight of exhaustion settle into his bones. The fight had been short, but the implications were long. Later, alone near a viewport, he watched a single tungsten slug drift past the ship, inert now, its velocity bled away by distance and time. It was unremarkable, small, dark, almost insignificant. And yet it had altered the course of a war. Marcus joined him, hands clasped behind his back in unconscious mimicry. "They're already calling it something," he said. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the gospel of momentum," Marcus replied. "Doctrine draft is circulating. They want our input." Elias let out a quiet breath that was almost a laugh. "Figures. Give a name to something, and they think they own it." "They don't," Marcus said. "Do they?" "No," Elias replied. "They just finally understand it." Outside, the stars burned with indifferent clarity. Light traveled endlessly, fast and beautiful, touching everything but changing little. Mass moved more slowly, but when it arrived, it left marks. Humanity would not be worshipped for this, Elias knew. They would not be feared forever, either. But they would be respected, and respect was enough. Respect meant listening. Listening meant fewer mistakes. A message blinked onto his console, an invitation to address the council again, this time not as an observer, not as an advisor, but as an instructor. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, then accepted. He looked once more at the drifting slug, already fading into the dark. "The universe remembers weight," he said softly, to no one in particular. Marcus nodded. "And now," he said, "so do they." The ship turned slowly, aligning for the long journey home, carrying with it a lesson written not in light or theory, but in mass and motion, unfinished, irreversible, and waiting to be learned again the next time someone mistook brilliance for inevitability.